really
Yeah.
ever since. So I
Yeah.
always start
Yeah.
recording early. Um, so the intent here is to talk about your book, talk about all the tracking pulse and heart rate. This is the
Hmm.
audience is uh, primarily people who exercise a lot and exercise coaches, like generally
Hmm.
fitness wellness people. I bet a lot of people are going to have some experience with wearables, etc. So
Hmm.
they can certainly like if you want to dig into jargon or things like that, they can probably keep up. But it's
Hmm.
really the intent is just to be like a conversation, right? I have a couple of
Yeah.
points. I read
Yeah.
over all of your stuff and listened to a couple of podcasts you were on,
I agree.
and I just
Yeah.
want to kind of have a chat. So hopefully it'll be
Yeah.
not exactly the same things you always get asked, but
Yeah.
it's also intended to just be kind of a chat back and forth.
Yeah. And we could aim it towards how to, balance the stress levels and training. Different things that can make recovery worse, and so on, and particularly women, with menstrual cycle, how to cycle their training, and so on. So, do you have used wearables yourself?
I have on and off. I've used a bunch of them, and I've
Hmm.
had kind of a middling experience, which I'm also happy
Hmm.
to talk about.
Yeah, yeah,
Let's
that would
save
be
it for
great.
the thing because I think it'll be
Yeah,
interesting to get into. I
yeah.
have a lot of clients who swear by them, and it does
Hmm.
very well. So it's I think we've got a whole
Yeah, we
spectrum
can
here.
talk about the pros and cons and everything in between. Yeah.
Sweet, I'm into it. I have a short little introduction I'll read, and we'll just launch right into it if that's okay. Hey, hello, and welcome to the Feel Strong Fitness Podcast. My name is Justin McClintock. On today's episode, we're joined by Dr. Torkil Færø. Dr. Færø is a filmmaker, award winning photographer, and author. He's also a GP and an emergency physician. After seeing firsthand, personally and professionally, how lifestyle stress impacts our health, he used this knowledge combined with tracking data to facilitate his own powerful transformation after realizing he had habits which were potentially costing him years of life. His best selling book, The Pulse Cure, describes how fitness wearables allowed him to not only track, but regulate his nervous system and physiology. I am excited to dig into this. Dr. Færø, welcome to the Feel Strong podcast.
Thank you, Justin. It's so great to be here. Thank you.
I'm excited for this. I suspect a lot of people listening, as we mentioned before we started recording, have some experience with wearables. But coming out of the gate, why would we track heart rate? Like to what end?
We would track it because the heart rate is kind of a speedometer. It kind of tells us the intensity, the load on our system. And we don't really have a sense developed throughout evolution for this. That is why, in this intense modern world, we need something to help us to find our stress balance. And we have excellent senses towards outward threats, like eyesight and hearing and sense of touch and smell and all of this. But we cannot really feel our inner stress levels. If we feel it, it's way above where it should be. So the heart rate will respond to any demand on our bodies. And as athletes, when you're doing workouts, you want to spend your energy on becoming stronger and more enduring. You don't want to waste energy on things that is just sapping you of your forces, and hindering recovery. So that is how we can use our heart rate and wearables to help us get the inflammation down, and yeah, and coupled with artificial intelligence, these wearables is a great tool to do that.
So that's an interesting point because I suspect if people have experience with wearables, some of them have probably only used it during exercise. I know that's where many years ago I was first introduced to the heart strap for heart rate based training around. I used to be a cross country and endurance runner. That was my specialty. And and I've done a lot of that, but then I took it off when I was done exercising. And you're talking more about tracking kind of all of the time to help us
Mm.
manage that load that, as you said, we might not realize the overall stress. And we talk about this a lot on the podcast that all stress is stress and everyone can only handle so much as a sort of external gauge of how much overall stress we're under. Yes, the exercise, but also sleep or lack of sleep, recovery, relationships, work, all of these things.
Yeah, exactly. So with this wearable, it's more important to track how our heart rate is outside of our workouts. So I agree with you. So many athletes use these trackers to track the heart rates and to get into the right zones, in their training. But it's much more important to see how your heart reacts after the training and what other factors can come in the way of your training. Lack of sleep, as you say. A lot of people find that when they track their heart rate, that there are certain foodstuffs they cannot tolerate, like gluten, or I cannot tolerate chili, for example. And that is quite horrible because it's
That's
never
tough.
mentioned in the ingredients, and they put it in everything to add some flavor. And just last night, I had a meal on a restaurant, and after a short while, I realized my heart rate just speeding up. Okay, there's chili in this, even if it wasn't noted, or I don't know why it should be chili in this dish. So, and that kept my heart rate speeding for like 6, 7 hours, way into the night, made it hard to fall asleep. But also, smaller amounts of chili would I would also react to that, and it would put my recovery rate down, so that when I wake up in the morning, I'm not as refreshed as I could have been. I've wasted some energy on dealing with the chili instead of using it to recover from a workout, for example.
That's interesting. So you notice heart rate kind of as a lagging indicator of a food intolerance. You've
Yeah,
noticed that when you have this, whether or not it's noted on the ingredient, if your heart rate spikes afterward, it most likely chili was part of the meal.
yeah, yeah, that's
Because
right.
I talk about this sometimes with food intolerances, kind of with anything that isn't optimal for health and wellness, right? Is making being able to notice those things so you can make the decision. Because you could
Yeah,
say, I'm going to this wonderful restaurant. The dish they're known for has a lot of chili in it. I'm going to make the decision to have this. I'm aware there will be consequences, and I'm willing or I'm not willing to have it. But having that information lets you make smarter choices as you go on.
yeah, because you can see the physiological price tag of the meal. So it's just like if you go to a restaurant and you see that, wow, this dish is great, but it cost $500, instead of 50, and it's exactly that you would think that the physiological price of chili, or I thought, would be like comparatively $50, and I see from the heart rate and the reaction to it that it cost me like 500 physiological dollars, so to speak. So you get an insight into your body budget, is what I'm writing about in the book. So you have a certain body budget of available energy for the immune system, for recovery, for your brain, for all your organs to work. And it's not infinite amount of energy. So if you spend energy on chili, there's less energy for the immune system and so on. So um, and if you and alcohol, for example, that's the worst one, of
Alcohol?
course. Alcohol, yeah, that's the worst stressor. According to Whoop, that you probably have heard of,
Oh,
probably a
yeah.
lot of your people use it in the States. It's the worst stressor because Whoop will gather information from their users, and they say that alcohol is the worst stressor of all. And I didn't know that. I used to drink a couple of glasses of wine every day. I thought it helped me to wind down in the evening. It would even help me to sleep.
Hmm.
But of course, once you see the result on your tracker, you understand that it's the opposite that is taking place. It's really, really taxing for your system throughout the night for most people. So,
That's a really interesting idea. And it kind of leads me to a bigger point, which is because a natural reaction to something like this, especially with people who feel like they have it pretty well together, have a lot of experience training, they kind of understand wellness and recovery to a degree. I can hear people saying, "Well, why can't I just listen to my body? I know when I'm stressed. I know when I'm doing well. Why do I need a piece of technology to tell me when I'm stressed?"
yeah, and that is because the senses have been directed towards outward threats, towards lions, enemies, food that is foul, that it contains bacteria that you're not supposed to eat, and so on. So we have these senses that is very accurate towards the outward threats. And if we had the same level and accuracy of for our inward threats from our inner system, it would have been in the way of the outward threats. But in our day, what threatens us is the inner balance, the inner stress balance. We are too busy. We are not recovering enough. And now we need to focus on the inner system, and we don't really have a sense for that. So the heart rate and through these monitors is kind of a substitution of this sense that we never needed to develop. It's kind of an amplifier of the sound of our system, so to speak, so that we can hear the noise or see it rather than in numbers and graphs and so on. So because there are very subtle differences, like I wouldn't know now if I have 60 or 80 in heart rate while I'm talking to you. And that would represent a quite huge difference in stress levels and physiological load on our system. And we're just not equipped to feel that. So I haven't met anyone starting to track their system that has not got surprises, even if they thought that they were well equipped to feel and listen to their body.
So you're talking about how overwhelmingly our senses and sort of stress responses are aimed at ensuring our survival. Most people, not everyone, but most people these days, probably most people listening to this, they're not overly concerned with their ability to survive the next day. Now we're really talking about like optimizing and thriving, and that's a much more subtle difference and dialing those things in. It's not the kind of gross stress responses that, 100,000 years or so of evolution have given us.
Yeah. So now it's small stressors, but over a long time without recovery. So that is what makes us sick. Um, and we don't feel it and we actually get used to it. So we think it's normal to feel a bit tired in the morning and to run out of energy during the day. So we just think that's normal or that is age or after you've turned 40 and so on, that is just how it is. But once you start optimizing, or I would rather say normalizing the system, then you suddenly feel that, okay, you're refreshed in the morning. You can keep up with your family life and work life throughout the day without having to lie down on the couch and rest or see something mindless on TV because you cannot get the energy to do anything else.
So that actually leads to a next interesting question. Well, I think it's interesting. Predictably, I always like my questions. What? How would people start setting goals? If they're listening to this, they're already on board. Like, yes, I'm going to start tracking, and I want to normalize and know that I'm doing better. How do they know if they're doing better? Like, what are some sort? And I don't want to pin you down and make you come up with a bunch of numbers, but what are some signs that things are going pretty well? And maybe it is I don't feel like I need to take 2 naps during the day, or my
Mhm.
resting heart rate is 48.
Yeah, so all of these trackers, and of course, I haven't tested everything, but at least Whoop and Aura and Garmin, are the ones I can primarily recommend,
Mm-hmm.
they will give you an answer after maybe they probably need 2 or 3 weeks to understand your system to calibrate the heart rate towards their numbers and use the artificial intelligence to give you an estimate of your stress levels. So they will give you this estimate. The Whoop band will tell you if you're in the red zone, the yellow zone, or the green zone, of recovery. And the Garmin will have a body battery system that will tell you how much have you charged during the night, how much energy do you have to spend this day. And also throughout the day, it will tell you how much do you have left. And the Aura Ring will give you a recovery score in the morning based on your baseline heart rate variability. So they will give you the answer. So you don't have to figure all this out by yourself. And also on Aura and Whoop, you can put in what you have done that day. So for example, today I could put in that I've been to the sauna and having a cold plunge, and they will calculate, the days that you do a certain things, how will that affect sleep and recovery? And they will give you Whoop will give you a weekly and monthly report, and Aura will give you like a reading that, okay, after having a cold plunge, the days you do that, you have a better deep sleep, for example, and better recovery. So you get help from artificial intelligence, but of course you have to use your own intelligence of what is happening in your life. So it's an aid that you have to, you know, you have to take everything into consideration, but it will tell you something that we don't have access to just by feeling it. So it's helping us while we are living our lives and concentrated on communicating or being with our family. The heart rate kind of keeps track of the intensity of the activity that we're doing and making sure that we recover enough, because that is, I think, the biggest problem. So the biggest problem is not that we are stressing too much necessarily, but that we are recovering too little. And often we don't even think that we need to recover, like we're just machines that can just go on and push ourselves. And we're not constructed for that.
Yeah, I think recovery is often the most overlooked thing, and people overestimate how well they're recovered. With that idea of using this information as you said, sort of a supplement, right? It doesn't mean ignore everything else going on in your life, but it's more information you didn't have access to before. How do you usually suggest people adjust based on that information? So if I wake up and I have, kind of a busy day, I'm recording a couple podcasts, I'm training some clients, I'm meeting with my lawyer, and I have a workout planned. If I wake up and whichever device I'm using, it says, "Hey, you're in the red. Be careful. You didn't sleep that well. Your HRV is garbage. You should probably go back to bed," but you're not going to do that. Do I do I cancel my podcast and my meeting with the lawyer? Do I
Yeah,
what
yeah, exactly. Probably,
yeah.
so you will have certain things during the day that you cannot postpone. Otherwise other people will be angry, or you'll get another problem.
Yeah.
So you can see what can you postpone. Is your lawyer a nice guy? Then you can just say that, okay, we take the meeting tomorrow instead, and he'll say, yeah, that's better for me too, or something. And of course, your workout, you can adjust the intensity. Maybe you can do a yoga or meditation instead. Uh, Maybe you can do some other kind of recovery work, maybe a cold water immersion, for example. And in this way, you can balance after the information that you get in the morning from your wearable. So that is the most important thing. And also, when you're in the podcast or when you're in the meeting, you can kind of slow down your intensity. You can do breath work as you are active. You don't have to be active and then wait and then recover. You can do slow breathing in the meeting or in the podcast while I'm talking. You can just focus on calming yourself down, in the meeting with the lawyer and so on. And of course, this would be best on the Garmin watch, because on the Garmin watch you could be able to push the button. And right now I can see that my stress level is 19 on a scale from 0 to 100. So this is
Pretty
quite
good.
quite good. I would not have known if it could have been 75, even with my experience. It could have been. And that could have been because I had eaten something at lunch that was maybe something with gluten or other things. But I wouldn't be able to feel that. So I was actually quite surprised when I saw that my heart rate is 57 and the stress level is 19. I think that is because I did the cold plunge 3 hours ago. So and it ended up a bit on the cold side. So this is probably the reason why my stress level is so low now. And in this way, you can adjust your speed. You can just imagine if you're driving in the traffic and suddenly a fuse blows and you cannot see your dashboard, and then suddenly there's a radar control or anything. You don't know your speed and you don't know how much is left on your gas tank, and so on. So suddenly you get access to this physiological speed intensity, and then of course what can be measured can be managed, and then it's so much easier to adjust your speed according to your surroundings.
And once you notice it, you can be intentional about it. So, like, just doubling back on something you said, you're not saying, oh, it's not a perfect day. We're going to cancel everything and not work out and stay in bed until I see that it's a perfect day. But it lets you be intentional about how you're going forward. It's like,
Yeah.
do I really need 3 espressos to start the day? Maybe not. That might not actually be the best thing for me right now so that I can do all of the things I need to do during the day. It might be adjusting that intensity and speed while carrying on with all the things I need to do in society and community and professionally.
Yeah, exactly. And if you're starting the day, with a low energy level, you may be tempted to go for a quick solution to have some chocolate bar or something. But after you have been knowing your own system, you would know that this chocolate bar will stress you. So then now you know that, okay, I should take an apple or a banana or some nuts instead, and that will not affect my system, or have a Caesar salad instead of the pizza slice that you may want, or crave more as you are a bit stressed that day. So in this way, you're able to make these small but important choices that each one of them is not so important, but when there's 10 good small choices, throughout the days, that is what changes the whole situation. And of course, you can also say and wake up in the morning that, okay, there's the time schedule is full today. I have no choice, but tomorrow I can rest. I'll make sure that I go to bed early. I skip the glass of alcohol. I stop eating at 6 p.m., which will make for a better night's sleep, and so on. So you're able to navigate and control your speed day and night, and it will take some time. I'm still working on it. After 5 years of this tracking, so getting to know your autonomic nervous system and physiology is as hard as learning to play a new instrument, or even harder. It would be much easier to learn to play the violin. And yet, a lot of people expect that, okay, after 2 months of tracking, everything should be in order. And they would not expect to be a violinist, after 2 months, or everybody would, you know, get some earplugs to avoid hearing you after 2 months. But tracking your physiology is quite complex. There's so many things going on, and your heart will respond to anything. So there is some detective work involved in this. And of course, a lot of people will find that their stress level is quite fine. A couple of adjustments here and there, and they're good to go. While other people may be quite overwhelmed by the stress that they're seeing on their wearable, and it could take a long time to detangle that and get to control it.
We often frame this as sort of being your own scientist. Like, don't be afraid to be an N of one, collect the information and enough information so you can start to see trends, which is what you're talking about, right? If I go through the day and at the end of the day, I notice my stress level, my heart rate is higher than I expected, my HRV isn't great. I don't know what it is exactly. It might have been the meeting I had. It might have been the nachos I had. It might have been the sleep I had last night. It could be any of these things. But if I track some of that stuff over a few weeks and certainly months, I can take a step back and say, every single Monday is bad. Let's take a look at what's going on Sunday. Because Monday is too routinely bad for this to make sense. What can we adjust? And then start adjusting small things and see how it responds. Like maybe gluten spikes your heart rate. Maybe it doesn't. If it doesn't, great. I'm so jealous you get to eat gluten. I wish I could eat all the gluten I want. Some people are fine on it. Same thing with dairy. I'm very jealous of the people who can just have all the dairy they want. That's not me. But it took a while to notice that. And this information can let you kind of dial in and notice your individual trends, which may or may not be what those around you respond to.
Yes, exactly. And because what counts is the NO1, right? It's not the NO 10,000. Because the average of 10,000 people may not have anything to do with your numbers, or what you're finding. So that is what is important. And just as in your case, I saw that when I was eating like anything, it would give me stress much more than I would expect. And I would see that other things I could eat with no problem, like a Caesar salad. And in the end, I just gave up finding out what it was. I took a food intolerance test and I found out that I have a low tolerance for gluten and milk. And once I can stay and regulate, down regulate that, not cut it totally out, then I'm a lot better. Uh, so that if I'm having an important lecture, if I'm doing something important, then I would be careful to eat something that will not stress me so that I can use my energy on the lecture and whatever is important.
Yeah, and it
So,
lets you make those choices to achieve, to optimize when you want to optimize. And you go in, you know, with all of the knowledge when you're going to do something. Like I will occasionally have pizza. I'm not going to feel great the next day after pizza.
yeah,
I
you
make
feel
that decision.
terrible.
This
Yeah,
pizza is going to be worth it. I don't have anything I desperately need to be focused on tomorrow morning. I'm going to be a little slow and a little logy in the morning. And that's,
yeah.
in this case, a price I'm potentially willing to pay.
Yeah, exactly. And pizza is one of the worst ones. So often on
I know.
Instagram, oh yeah, often on Instagram, I will show what I'm reacting to a certain food. So I'll put out the curves and the numbers on Instagram, and I then occasionally ask people, okay, what do you react to? And pizza is in every other person's numbers. And of course, it's a hugely popular dish. I used to eat pizza more or less every day while I was in my internship or residence or whatever you call it. I used to have pizza every day. It was quick, just put it in the oven, take it out and eat, of course. And had I known the extent that this was stressing me in addition to a stressful job, I would have found something else. But at that time, I didn't have any trackers, so it makes it possible, as you say, to take a decision so that you know that the day after there's nothing important going on. You can concentrate on enjoying this pizza that you want, and you have made a qualified choice, with knowledge.
And we're kind of talking now about using the trackers to optimize your recovery, which, as we said before, is sort of overlooked a lot. Sleep is the king. Sleep, like I often tell people, like if we can't get your sleep dialed in, there's nothing I can give you that is really going to get where you want to go until we really attack your sleep. Are there ways that you've used or seen people use trackers to optimize sleep?
Yes, absolutely. So what they quickly find out is a few hacks. That is to have a consistency so that you go to bed and wake up at more or less the same time every day. That makes your brain prepare, and it goes more easily and automatically into the right sleep phases when you do that compared to, sleeping late one day and so on. And also to keep the bedroom quite cool, between 60 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit should
Mhm.
be okay. Some people prefer even lower than that. You should not have alcohol, of course, um, anywhere close to bedtime. And you should also avoid eating late. Eating later than 3 hours before bedtime would also cause a lot of stress into the night. I was recently at a 50-year birthday party, and the cakes were on the table only at 11 p.m.
Oh,
Okay.
okay.
Yeah. And so I had like four huge slices of cake. They were so good. But the stress levels for the next 6, 7 hours is just as high as if I were having a lecture in front of 100 or 200 people. So my body is just reacting, using all this energy on. You're kind of waking up a system that wants to go to sleep. So our digestional system is not made to be awake at night and digesting food. And this is why the stress level was way higher than it would have been if I had those cakes, at 6 o'clock, when they are when the pancreas, the liver, everything is working more smoothly, and in the right, according to their circadian rhythm. So that is something to be aware of. Also, that your bedroom should be really dark. Just you shouldn't be able to see a hand in front of you. A lot of people have too much, you should paint your walls, or have wallpaper that is really dark so that no light will be kind of reflected and increase the amount of light in the bedroom. If you're traveling and you can't get control of the lights, you should have a sleep mask, of course.
Hmm. I love traveling with a sleep mask. I also
Mm.
do a lot of turning clocks over and tipping over, especially in a hotel room.
Yeah,
There's just 12 LEDs that are just kind of on all the time. Like,
yeah,
oh, okay, I'm wander around and cover these up or turn them over or do something with them.
yeah. Or
That can
bring
make a
some
surprising
tape.
difference.
Yeah, or bring some tape to if they're really glowing, in the dark. So yeah. So some of these things that can help you improve your sleep, because as you say, sleep is king, and for recovery, that is when your body is building itself stronger after your workout. So if you just do the workout and don't care about recovery, you're not getting the payback for your investment. So it's kind of a waste.
Are there well, actually, let me back up because I know that was I was about to start an unfair question. Before we started recording, I mentioned to you that I'd had kind of a mixed experience with wearables. I have a number of friends and clients who love them. I have a couple of people who never want to track anything. I've tracked a number of times, including with multiple models of Whoops, and I routinely had the experience where what the device was telling me wasn't matching up with my reality. And it kind of went both ways. I had times when I woke up and I was like, I feel like a truck ran over me. I am slow. I'm tired. I have no energy. I'm going to I'm going to get on a bike and pedal for 15 minutes and that's all I have today. And the device was saying, you're amazing. You're recovered. Go lift all the weight. And the same thing the other way. I've had the device saying, you're dying. It's time to go back to bed. I'm like, I feel like a lion. I feel amazing. I have all the energy in the world. What's going on? And I found that frankly frustrating. And I tried for months and months and eventually just put them away and moved on. What happens? One, have you run into that experience with people? And two, how do you approach that when people say, well, this isn't what I'm feeling? I feel like I'm noticing one thing and the device is telling me something different.
Yes, that can happen because the device can only tell you the state of your autonomic nervous system, your basic physiology. So you may feel better after the workout kind of in your brain, in your prefrontal cortex. You have been working out, you feel satisfied, and it's worth pushing your body when it may have physiologically benefited from resting. So it's just the bottom part of the brain that we're measuring. It's not your prefrontal intelligent intellectual part of the brain. So it may be because of that. And of course, you should always use your own intelligence coupled with this artificial intelligence, because these devices can only use your heart rate and your movement and temperature, and it's big data from so many users and make an estimate of what is happening to you. But it is just on your arm, so it doesn't have the full picture. So you have to override what the device tells you at some point. But I must say also that Garmin is a lot better choice than Whoop. So Whoop is good, but if you really want to have control of this, then Garmin is far superior, I would say.
Why is that? Because we've mentioned a bunch of them, but there's watches and bracelets and chest straps and forearm straps and rings, and there's so many kinds of wearable out there. So is Garmin your number one?
Yes, absolutely number one. Whoop may be number for people who do workouts. It would be number two. If you don't do workout, the Aura Ring would be number two. So for kind of people who work out occasionally or
Hmm.
just in moving, and not such a big scale, the Aura Ring would be better. But for tracking exercise, I would say Whoop is number two.
So why
And
is the Garmin number one?
they're number one both because of the accuracy, but maybe even more from the algorithms, from their system of being able to push a button and see your stress level in the moment, and to have this body battery system. And because they present it so that it's very easy to understand, and it's very actionable, and you kind of get the full picture. The The backside of it is that you cannot put in any information. So it's not like Whoop where you can get this weekly and monthly report that you probably have experienced. So there are pros and cons, but overall, I would say that Garmin is by far the best. It's also cheaper. So the Whoop, is an annual prescription model,
Hmm.
while you can get a good Garmin watch for the same price that will last you, 4 years or 5 years, or until you want to buy a new one. It will probably work for 10 years, but you
Without
probably
that
want to,
subscription model that's always following
yeah,
you.
yeah.
And I'm interested because I know people are going to ask why the 2-3 of Aura and Whoop? Why the distinction rather of if someone is? It sounds like if someone's really concerned about performance metrics in their workouts, Whoop is the way to go. If not, they should probably do the Aura
Com-
ring.
yeah. But Garmin number one.
Hmm.
But
So
if
why
not
the?
Garmin, because Whoop is particularly active in finding out the strain during the day. So Aura is not particularly good during the day, and it's because it's a small device. It's a small ring. It's limited how much power and battery power and tracking you can put into the ring, and they prioritize the measurements at night. Whoop is of course bigger and a larger battery, and is more focused towards athletes, and it's better at measuring activities and measuring the strain. So the Whoop band will give you a recovery number in the morning, and throughout the day you will see that the strain circle will increase until it says that, okay, now you reached a good level of strain compared to your recovery. So yeah, so that is why it's good, and also that you can put in what you're doing. If you're doing cold plunges, what kind of exercise you do, and you will get results back that can be useful for a lot of people who live regular lives. But I'm living such a unregular life
Yeah.
and predictable life that to me it wasn't useful for me. So it could, for example, say that when you do cold plunges, you have a more stress. But the reason is that I do the cold plunges if I'm stressed. So it wasn't the cold plunges that was the stressing factor. It was other things that led me to take the cold plunge at that day. So these kind of things.
And there is some stress with getting into a cold plunge, but we know that the useful effects are so significant, assuming that's what you're after, that it's worth it, which is often how I describe
Yeah.
exercise, right? At the end of an hour
Yeah.
long workout, you are weaker than when you started, but we know
Yeah.
that useful stress, the adaptations are going to be worth it, which is why we
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah. And if you don't allow yourself to recover, it will not build itself stronger from that exercise. And the cold plunge, you can see on the Garmin watch that it's stressful when you come into the cold water, but after a little while, the heart rate will go down, the heart rate variability will go up, and it can last for hours afterwards. And of course, when you see that, it's more motivating because it's quite uncomfortable, of course, always to get into that cold water. It's never comfortable. It's always a challenge. And you're not able to think about your shopping list while you're in the cold water. It's you're only there,
Yeah,
taking it.
focusing and
Yeah.
breathing and breathing and focusing.
Yeah.
What about I've occasionally run into people, and this happens more with nutrition I found, but I have seen it with trackers where they get a little obsessive, and suddenly the act of tracking seems to be an added stress.
Yeah. And then it's often a sign that they have this problem in many other areas of life as well. It's not isolated to this one. So they may be over obsessed by a lot of things and not having the ability to say that good enough is best. That is why I'm talking about health normalization, so that your health is not in your way, rather than health optimization, because that may be too much focus. At least for me, I don't want to spend most of the day thinking about my health. I want to live my life, and do interesting things. And the health is just supposed to be there, kind of in the background, not disturbing you or being in your way. Uh, and to achieve that, I don't think you can be obsessed about your health. So that is, I don't think it's a good thing. It's not a good way to live a life. So, and it happens to some people, they're obsessed about anything, so it's the middle way also here, as in many other places, that good enough is best, unless of course you're a top athlete and you need to have those extra millimeters. But that is often a matter of being better at recovery more than pushing yourself.
And using those things, the how is the rest of my life going, as a metric for how is my recovery, how is my workout, how is my stress level, how are all those things. I really like that as a measure, because generally
Hmm.
we talk a lot about how everything we do in the gym should really just improve the rest of your life. The point isn't to win in the gym, again, unless you are a performance athlete, professional competitor, unless that is the thing you're in the gym for, is only to run a little faster, lift a little more weight, jump a little higher, etc. 97% of people want to have the lives they think people who go to the gym all the time get to have, and having that optimized recovery fed by this tracking can only improve that.
Hmm. Yeah, I very much agree with that. Yeah, exactly.
I have a bigger question based on something I learned about you. First of all, is it true that you speak 8 languages?
Yeah, it's true. I wouldn't be fluent in them, but I would get by. Even in Italy, which is probably my lowest language, I would. If I'm on a trip in Italy, I would be able to order food and talk easy conversations. I may be able to read the newspaper, because I know the words that I read more than I can put them from the back of my
Mm-hmm.
mind. But yes, yeah. But I've been traveling a lot. So, and often the key is to be traveling in a country where they don't speak your language. So, when I traveled in South America for, like, I think it was 9 months, the only way to get food, and get by was speaking Spanish. They didn't know any English. And I used to bring my language course,
Mm-hmm.
and I used to bring Donald Duck, the comic books
Uh-huh.
of Donald Duck, because that's a easy language and it's dialogue based, and it's something you can read on the bus journey or while you're waiting for something to happen. And you have a dictionary aside, so as long as you're a bit focused, or at least for me, and I think it's interesting, to speak the language, a new language. So
Well,
it's kind
it's
of a
very
hobby.
interesting.
Hobby
Are you talking about buying comic books in that language as a way of
in that
doing the
language. Yeah,
immersion?
yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, so
that's
I just
interesting.
go to the supermarket, and then they would have in the kids row, they would have
Mm-hmm.
different comic, small books, or I don't know what you call it, magazines. Yeah,
How do you adjust as someone who travels extensively and to places that um, deliberately making yourself a little uncomfortable? I think it's fair to say going to South America, not super confident in Spanish, is going to be a little bit
yeah,
of an uncomfortable sensation. These are
yeah,
things. These are the kinds of things a lot of people want to do, and the kinds of
hmm,
things some people find incredibly stressful. So,
yeah.
how do you regulate and manage around these kind of real life situations? What kind of adjustments are you making?
I think It depends on the level of how worried you are. So I may actually have the opposite problem of many people who would be worried about that. I'm too little worried.
You love it.
I've been in situations in Bogota or Venezuela or in Rio de Janeiro, and,
Mm-hmm.
and Africa and Johannesburg, that in hindsight, it was maybe not a smart place to be. But being not worried and being somewhat fearless, um, it came naturally to me to do it. So I'm not really able to put myself in the mind if you're worried or a bit anxious about it. But I think it's just a matter of doing it, and putting yourself out there, being a bit uncomfortable, getting accepting that things can be hard and difficult, and that you may not, succeed and still do it, so don't let fear be in your way. So I may have been apprehensive, about, going into new continent where I don't speak the language, and that I know more or less nothing about except for a guidebook. So but I did it from an early age. I did it from when I was like 20 years old, so
Mhm.
it's kind of been my way of life, really. So that may be the explanation, but life should be an adventure. So but in able to live your life as an adventure, you have to keep your health at the bottom of this, so that you have a stable health, so that you're able to do that. And I wish for everybody to be able to live out their dreams and live their adventure. So that is my main goal, really, to help people to do that, to become better at life skills, better at, you know facing challenges, and how to do that. Yeah.
And having that capacity and function as the foundation of their life allows people to potentially say yes to things like this. And
Yeah.
that will also give them the ability to kind of overcome that fear a bit, or at least do it a little bit scared, which is kind of what you're
Mm.
describing. Like, there
Yeah.
might be some hesitation, but I think it's worth it. And I'm confident in my ability to navigate most things that come my way. That's not
Mm.
something that just drops out of the sky. That's
Mm.
built by how you live your life, how you treat your sleep, how you treat your exercise, how you treat your stress every single day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
Anything I really should have asked you that I haven't yet, because I'm
I
finding this
think
fascinating.
yeah, I think that depends a bit if you have a female audience, but the
Overwhelmingly.
menstrual cycle,
Okay.
what's that? You have
Uh,
female audience?
it's like 80% female.
Oh, okay. Then it's really important,
Yeah.
because the menstrual cycle will really affect your available energy throughout the cycle. So the week before menstruation, that is the problematic week, where if you have too much stress in your life, that week you will have a much lower heart rate variability, a much lower available forces that week. So, and when you see that week coming on your Garmin or Aura, or Whoop, then you can mitigate the stress. You can do yoga instead of high intensity training. You can make sure that you don't, drink alcohol, that you stay away from ultra processed food, that you prioritize sleep, and so on. And then you will be able to flatten that curve of the dip in the heart rate variability. And I can see that for women with PMS symptoms, this dip in heart rate variability is as large as with COVID, when I see other people with COVID infection. So it's actually quite a huge load on the system. So it's not just a feeling of being irritated or, snappy or whatever. It's a physiological load on your system, so that you have to take into consideration.
I like
So
that, of noticing that data, because there's been, certainly for the past, I don't know, 18 months, 2 years, I feel like there's been a lot of hay made over women completely changing their exercise routines based on where they are in their cycle, which often seems a little far to me. But noticing that there is added stress, having some numbers to back it up, and then making other changes in your life. So, as we talked about previously, you can
mm,
kind of keep doing the things you want to be doing and still have
mm,
the available capacity to succeed at that. It makes perfect sense.
yeah, because the problem is the cortisol level. So that cortisol will disturb the female reproductive hormones. And this is by nature, because if it was a stressful time in the Stone Age, it wasn't the time to have babies and get pregnant. You would want to minimize the chances of getting pregnant. That is why cortisol will disturb these hormones. And if your heart rate variability is low, then there's a lot bigger chance of getting endometriosis, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and it's a larger chance to have infertility and to have spontaneous abortions, or I think that is what it's called, at least in Norwegian. And you increase the chances of getting these problems because the body will always prioritize survival over reproduction in a stressed state. So, and of course, this ancient system that I in my book call the living fossil in our brains, it doesn't know that it's 2024 or 2025 when this is aired, maybe. Um, and that the problem is that your boss is not nice.
Right.
This system will sense it like there's a lion threatening you or another tribe threatening you, and there's no time to get pregnant now. You need to survive first, and then we can see afterwards, you know. So that is a mechanism behind why stress will affect the reproductive system.
That makes
So
perfect sense. I hadn't heard those correlations before, but your body reacting in these ways is the most natural thing. And we also see it sometimes with even breathe types of breath work or novel exercises. People get put into an uncomfortable position for the first time, and their heart, especially if they have a tracker, their heart rate will spike. And I usually explain it. Oh, your body thinks you're being chased by a bear. It doesn't know I just
hmm,
put you in a mean kind of sit-up machine. We're going to do,
hmm,
90 seconds of breath work, flip some switches on your nervous
hmm,
system, and then we'll be able to move forward. And you can
hmm.
watch the heart rate come down, watch everything kind of even out.
Yeah, exactly.
Dr. Færø, this has been fascinating. Where should we send people? Where should people go to find out more about you, find more about the Pulse Cure?
Yes, of course, they can buy the book. The Pulse Cure is a paperback book, but it's also an ebook and an audiobook. A lot of podcast listeners wants to listen to books, while they're working out. They can listen to the Pulse Cure. And also, we have a website with thepulsecure.com where there is a free video lecture where you can see what I'm talking about with the graphs and the cold exposure and everything that we've been talking about. And on Instagram, I'm Dr. Torkil, Dr. Torkil. So you can follow me there. I try to, give some interesting advice there. So
That's perfect. And we will put all of that in the show notes. So if you're listening to this, you can look at your device and press some links and go there right away. Dr. Færø, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
yeah, thank you so much, Justin. So great to be here and explain everything that is my passion, and I hope it will be useful for your listeners.
Absolutely. I really appreciate it.